it's me again. You know what that means. It's time for another one of your favorite episodes on the Main Street Randyland YouTube channel. Hooray! Let's hear it. Come on, big hooray. Okay, that's well. I heard you at home going hooray. I could tell. Okay, we are over here in Randyland, one of my wonderful favorite places to be, and somebody was asking me about crane machines. Well, I'm sure everybody has played crane machines somewhere, somehow, but have they really played crane machines? Not the way I know crane machines. You know, again, being as old as the pyramids, some people say, crane machines go back further than I. And when I was a young lad and I was playing in the penny arcades, crane machines were a penny. A penny. And sometimes you hit one that was 2 cents, a nickel, or a dime, but you never saw one that was a quarter back when I was 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. What could you win for a couple pennies? You weren't playing the crane machine to necessarily win that prize. Yes, it was the challenge of winning the prize. That was part of the fun. But you played because you were playing for fun. And that is something I'm always telling people, the reason amusements have changed, because people's attitudes have changed. If you're playing the game for fun, you always win. If you're playing the game because you want to win that prize, chances are you're not going to get it, or it's going to cost you a lot to do it. It's not exactly fun. So different people, different ideas of fun. But I'm old-fashioned, and I go back to the days when cranes were fun. Here's a couple examples. Over here, you have the old-fashioned penny digger. Look at the size of the claw. That claw is small. I could put that entire claw in my hand. What are you picking up with that claw? Plastic whistles, little trinkets, false teeth, some seashells with a paper flower in it. Now, there are some bigger things in there, but those are the lure. Chances are you're not going to pick up that box with whatever's in there, or that larger thing over on that side. It can happen, but what you're playing for are basically the trinkets that's inside the crane. I remember when I was little, they had, plastic fruit, and they had plastic, fake walnuts and almonds, and it was the novelty of it. And you could actually get from the larger arcades little tiny paper bags, like you were playing, like you were going to a candy store to get some penny candy. They would give you a paper bag to carry your little treasures that were coming out of the crane machines. And you'd stand there dropping your coins in, and you'd blow your whistle, and everybody would laugh. And it was just a good old time. You were there for fun. Now, this is not even the oldest crane machine that you can find. They made very, very old cranes that were completely made of wood styles, kind of like these rotaries next to it, which were all the wood finish. But the crane machines were usually, exhibit supply company, and they would call it, a crane, and you would turn it, and it would look like a crane. And this crane, the part where it drops it is in the middle. You can actually turn that crank, and the crane in the middle will turn around to different directions. You don't have a button or a joystick to press. The joystick would go right, left, up, down. You don't have that here. You don't have a button to go forward, another button to go over. You don't have that. You would set the crane's position by turning that knob, and it would turn the entire apparatus. And then you'd put your coins in, and the crane would reach forward, drop down, and pick up and go back. In the back of the machine, you see that little marking there? It's got a gauge in it. The gauge is on the bottom right now, and I can't read it from here, but in the back on the bottom probably is close to the center, whereas at the top the gauge might be further out. So when you turn your knob, that would go up and down and up and down. So when you turn your crane to a position, you could also select by that gauge how far out you want the crane to reach. That's how you set it. And once you set it and you put your coins in, the crane would then go out that far or stay in that far and drop the claw down to pick up what you could, bring it back and drop it in this model in the center. This machine is called a side bottom. A very unusual, odd name. You would turn the crank then to face the crane towards the front and press the little white button in the front of the game, which would then open the flap under the crane and drop the prize down to you in the chute. At one time when they were brand new, I think, and I never played it when it was brand new, I think that it automatically turned it back to the center and dropped it to you. But that was long since not functional when I got them, and I have a feeling that it was just something that was never made right, that didn't work like that. So they made you turn it back into the position to drop it down. See what it says in the middle with the paper sign? Set crane to desired position, then put dime in. What's it say below that? To get prize out, turn crane to the front and press button. And that's how you would get your prize. Now, I have 4 of these. And these came from Bev and Wally's Sportland in Keensburg Amusement Park. And these machines, although I got them from Keensburg Amusement Park, these machines were also used in Ocean City, New Jersey, Point Pleasant, New Jersey, and in Wildwood. And possibly other places too, depending upon who they bought them from. But machines get moved around from location to location. They came in various colors. This one is a red one. And over on the side here, you have a brown one. And inside that one, you have interesting little products. Those are in the shape of cookies, but they're actually erasers. And when they were new, each one smelled like the cookie that it was. So you had fake Oreos, they smelled like Oreos. And you'll see the sign on the front, it says, no food, these are play erasers, because we don't want you chewing on them and eating on them. Kind of a more valuable prize than the whistles were, so this one was actually run by 20 cents, whereas the other one was running at a dime. Now, those prices were the prices I was operating them at in 1981. And Keensburg Amusement Park, I ran them in Action Arcade. Early years also. Here we have the same type of wood finish. This is like a furniture finish, lamination. There's no Formica involved with it. They didn't even invent Formica back then. You have the moldings that are hand carved, very curved wood. It's a very hard wood. This is a Holly crane made by the Como Manufacturing Corporation. And this one was set last use for $0.25. Typically, when I played these as a kid, they were a nickel, and then they became a dime, and then they became a $0.25. Now the Holly crane, after you got your prize, you'd push that handle, and out would come the flap. Turn the handle, the door opens, and you get your prize. Isn't that nice? How they did that? Now, in later models that were older, they didn't have the handle. You had to pull to get your prize. See how they made improvements over the years. I like the handle. I think that's pretty cool. But this is much simpler. Just pull it to get your things. This carriage was the beginning of the cranes that became later, where you push the button to go forward and push the button over. This is going back to the 40s. Here's your forward button. Here's your side button. You push the forward down, the carriage moves up. You release it, the carriage stops. Push the right button, it goes over, you release it, it stops. When it stops, it goes down, opens, claw, close, pull it up, automatically move over left, move over back, drop the prize. In this one, you have some t-shirts and prizes of that nature, which are pretty good to win for $0.25. But what was in this machine in 1976? State of New Jersey, Division of Treasury, vending machine, cigarette license, 1976. So they were putting packs of cigarettes in this crane machine, probably running it for a quarter, and you would try to pick out packs of cigarettes and get your smokes. And trust me when I tell you, it did very, very, very well when that was a cigarette machine. Today, you can't do that. You're not allowed to have cigarette games like that. Yep. Okay, here we are inside the Holly Crane. Interestingly enough, now this is missing one of these brackets here. This bracket here is missing, which would be this piece that would slide over with the lock. See how it slides over for a better security position, but it's good enough with one. I could make a bracket, but that's missing. Your handle guide, just moving. Very simple the way it's done. Over here, these pieces of metal would simply press against here when you close the door. And that would be the current connection for your coin switch in order to run the game. Now, obviously, they've seen better days, and they were probably never great connections to begin with, so I put a wire on it. But it makes it so I cannot completely remove the door. That's why they had the press on, because you can pull that door out. Now here I'm limited to the length of my wire. But what's really, really nice about these Holly Cranes is the accessibility of the maintenance. You actually have a tilt circuit, like a pinball machine, a pendulum tilt. So if you shook it, you'd lose the game. How about that on a crane? All open stack relays, all right, with your switches. Everything very easily serviceable. Very easily serviceable. They'll run for 1,000,000 years. This was added by me. I have some sort of time lockout on it so that if for some reason or another the crane gets stuck and I don't want to burn any of my motors, so I have it shutting it out with a time lockout. Game counter, power supply, but even better with the works in a drawer. Look at this. I can actually slide this out, and look how they figured this out. To hold the weight, I have a wheel on each side. They lock in position so I can roll my carriage right out of the machine. Isn't that the best? I mean, you can load that now so easily how you want to load your prizes in there. This looks a little crooked, doesn't it? It's not exactly straight. Why? Because it comes off. And here you have your carriage mechanism. Gears, brass gears down in there. These are clutches. There's a slide leather piece in there, which will have to be all serviced before this is used again, because that's obviously dried onto there. But that'll allow that clutch to spin without breaking the teeth on there. And then as the cam follower, see that? I can do it that way. That's how you adjust with these screws here. You would adjust that higher or lower for as the hitting as that cam turns so it knows where it is. You have a couple more relays here. Another switch here. Look at the worm gear. See the worm? So it'll drag the carriage over, drag the carriage back. More gears here. Best of all, solenoids to engage your clutches. The teeth. So this gear will engage to ride that up, to ride it back. Got teeth on both sides. Here's a switch, which is activated when the carriage comes back. When the carriage comes all the way back, push the switch. That's how it knows it's made it back to home. It'll stop the game. They don't make games like this anymore. I'm sorry to tell you. You see all these? That's not just for Art Deco fancy look. Each one of those is another separate bus of current connectivity, both sides. You have contacts which are riding those rails. Each one is touching on another rail. You're getting all your circuitry through these rails. On this one, over here on this one. All your circuitry, your continuity is going on those rails. There are no wires connecting that carriage to the machine at all. It is all riding on the rails. This is when engineers went to the trouble of making things right. You never broke a wire with the crane claw going back. You never broke anything. The only wire you had to worry about was the wire on the claw itself, okay, which has the coil inside. That can wear out because it has to be a wire. It's hanging on a chain. You can't have a bus bar. On this style claw, when they're energized, they open. When they're de-energized, just the weight of the claw will close it. Simple as that. The new claws are the opposite. Why do they do that? Because now they can control how strong the claw is. When you're giving that claw power to close the claw, you can give it less power or more power, depending upon how tight you want to close the claw. This is all done by the weight of the claw. It's even got a spring here, okay, that'll push it down. But you have only the guide of the weight that's changing that. The machine is not changing it. It's set, and that's what it's going to be. You got 4 rails on the carriage for when the claw moves over. You see the contacts on it? See that? Each one is riding the rail. And look how precisionally close they are. Very little space between that contact and the next bar. If that were to touch the next bar, obviously it would be either a short or some kind of wrong feature. But that just goes over, and you got another gear here, okay, with your chain, with your claw, rolling it down. And that's going to pick up its movement by the worm gear. All controlled by one motor. And all the rest is done by the engaging of clutches. Now, as I remember, pushing them in was not always as easy as pulling it out, even though it's on wheels. I think if I take the wheels off now, yep, that's what it is. A dusty quarter. The next generation after Holly cranes, you got into the Lucky Crane. A little more modern machine. You see it says right on the carriage, Lucky Crane. Here it says Lucky Crane. They work on the same principle as the Holly crane, but they're not built like the Holly crane was. And I'm not going to be able to easily open this because on this machine, these top pieces will lift up so you can reach down into it. But with all these heavy lights on the back of it, there's no way I could lift it. But let's see what we can see from the front. All right. Can't lift this door out. Originally you could, but they added hinges. That's not original. They added those hinges, so I cannot pull this door off. And there's really nothing you can access here. There's nothing accessible. The coin mechanism would go here. It's not in it. This would be a coin box. It's locked. Your prize will roll out here. You got your light. Your mechanisms are all in the back of this machine, and it's using relays on cards. And to open the top, you push these flaps here, and the top will lift up. But there's no bus bar systems. It's all run by a wire. A flat cable, as I recall. See those ribbon cables? Oh, they're awful. Ribbon cables are not meant for moving back and forth frequently. So that's got to fold this way and that way. You see it all? That's the ribbon laying there in that channel. That's one long ribbon that's going up to that top chassis. So as it rolls this way, it rolls flat back. Same thing there on that piece there. That's a ribbon cable. That's connecting to the chassis again. So when the carriage moves up, when the carriage moves back, it's all going through that ribbon. When it moves to the right or the left, it's always on that ribbon. And those ribbons, as you keep doing it, they're going to fail. So Lucky Cranes, 60s. And they were still being used into the 70s. Some people still use them. They can be made to continue to work. I can keep them going. I mean, I know it'll break, I'll replace it. This, you can see the ribbon cable here, how it's lifted, because the carriage is pushed all the way up. You see how the ribbon is lifted? The prizes shouldn't be up like that. They should be down here. This was tilted and the things all fell over. But over here, this was made by Sega. And this was before the Lucky Crane, but after the Holly Crane. Now let's see if there's much difference here. Love it. Here you have a Sega. You have a lot of the mechanisms in the front, not all of them. You have a big stepper unit. Controls here. Schematics even. Look at that. Got the schematics. What's unusual about the Sega Crane is the whole thing is run by a step unit. The step unit will advance according to what you're doing. Remember, first you push the button, like the Holly Crane and the Lucky Crane. You push the button, hold it in to make it go forward. When you release, it stops. Then you push that button to make it go over. When you release, it stops. Then it goes down, it goes up, and then it comes back. But all that was done by relays in the Holly Crane. Where's all the relays here? Only a couple. It's run by the control stepper. You press the button down, it's step 1. Energizes the motors to move forward. You release it, because it was on step 2, it'll move to step 3. Now it's waiting for that button. You push the button, goes to step 4. When you release the button, step 5. It'll automatically drop the crane down. When the crane goes down, it knows it. It'll move to step 6, move the crane up. Step 7, move the crane, move everything back to the home position. Step 8, and you're ready for the next coin. Problematic. The Holly Cranes work forever. These, you got to service a lot. The Lucky Cranes, if it wasn't for the cheap way they did it with the ribbon cables, it would have been fine. But the Holly Cranes are the best. Well, when they got to the, I'm going to say the 80s, it's about right. They started with the cranes that were going to go for the stuffed animals. So they came out with the triple crane. As a matter of fact, this is one of the originals. This is a triple way crane. And if I'm not mistaken, it's made by Sonic. This one should have somewhere on it. There's, oh, there it is, Sonic. I was right again. This was a big deal when these first came out. And you had 3 cranes in one big cabinet. And it was high, and it was visible, and the mirrors in the back. It was really a very good design. And they put prizes like this in there, you know, nice little stuffed animals, very achievable to win. And they were usually a quarter, some were 50 cents, depending upon the prizes you were going for. They worked on the same principle as the old Holly Cranes. Forward, sideways. You got 2 presses. One, you press it in and hold it so it goes forward. Release, press it and hold it once. Back, down, up goes the crane, drops the prize. These machines made a lot of money, and they cost a lot of money to buy one. Gosh, I bet you this triple machine was probably $5,000 back in those days. But they emptied quarters. They had a box that would have held probably $1,000 worth of quarters in there. They were pumping out prizes on this stuff left and right. And I guess back then they were able to buy the stuffed animals cheap enough that they could have a lot of winners for quarters. Great, great. Well, how did they control it? If you remember, looking at the Holly Crane, if you remember, the claw was in its closed position when the machine was not energized. Here, the claw is in the open position. And when the coil is energized here, it pulls the claw shut. And that's how the machine operates. So it's completely dependent upon how much power is in this cylinder here with its coil. If you can lower the power pull on this claw, then it can pull in, and the weight of the prize can pull right out of there. See that? Just pull right out. If it's real tight, it's really hard to pull it out. Ideally, a good crane operator wants to have winners. You cannot expect people to play over and over again if nobody wins. So they want to have winners, but not too many winners. They want to adjust it just right. So their adjustments were kind of limited. If this one, I think it's unlocked. All right, look at the size of this cash box. Oh my God. Do you have any ideas how many quarters could fit in that box? I bet you that could hold a couple thousand easy. Easy. I don't think you can move it, but it could. You really only have 2 relays, a large capacitor, and some diodes. And that's what's running this crane based upon switches. Well, the problem here is the amperage pull. It's actually a very good design, and it's using DC so that they can reverse the current, and rectifiers, which are big diodes, can control the current flow from one direction to another very easily. But you've got a pretty good spike when you're going from positive to negative, because motors and coils will hold a little back juice to it. So what happens is those relays, the contacts on the relays will actually start becoming little welding machines. And if one relay welds the contact onto the other side, when it releases, you got a direct short, and you're going to blow that fuse on the bottom, which blows all the time on these boys. So the relays are the culprits, and the newer models, which this one probably was redone, the relays should be removable with a little dynamite. Yep. I can pull that relay out of there, and I can put a new one in. You got pretty large contacts on here. It says 10 amps. They look like they're more than 10 amps. They would probably have to be, but it's rated for 10 amps. And obviously this relay has worked pretty well for them, so they've kept it in there. But they are in plugs, because when that fuse blows, one of those relays is going to be locked on, and you're going to have to either take it apart and really file it down or replace it. On the mechanism here, you have a micro switch there. As this string comes down and it has nowhere to go and it leaves tension, this part will lift up, and then this switch will open up, and then this switch here goes down. When that goes all the way down, it touches the bottom. So that's how it knows where the claw is. This is a ride carriage sitting on the top of the machine. Very simple. The pulleys turn, it rides the rails over, back. Got a switch on the end, so it knows if it gets to the end, hits the switch, tells the machine, I'm over at the end. It's a switch here, so when it's riding the rails this way, it knows. It also knows if it presses in this switch. See that? In there. And you got one in the back. So it knows where it is. If it's going to hit something, it's going to know that. Here you got your motors. One's going to turn the string for the claw going up and down. The other's going to turn the riding of the rail, directly riding on the rail. This is really a pretty good design. We're missing a wheel here. It's just a matter of what you're doing and how you're controlling this as far as being an operator is concerned. And you'll see what they've done here. I love it. Where these wires are here, that's where the original relays were. So this place went through so many of these that they couldn't do it anymore. So they put these mounted on the side, relay sockets, and then ran the wires into the holes for where the relays were. I didn't do this, but I mean, I would have been neater, but that's what they did. But what's even more important here, it's right here. They added a rheostat. And this is going right over to this position where it probably originally was a set resistor. Well, what this is doing is by turning that knob, you are controlling how much resistance you're putting to that claw coil. So they can very easily make that claw stronger, make that claw weaker. So what they would do is the attendant would come over and he'd go in the bottom of the machine like he's doing something with the coin and just reach in, give it a little turn. And just like that, he's changed your ability to win on that crane. So your friendly neighborhood attendant who was coming over to help you out with the smile, turned it down, made it so you couldn't win anymore. That's the reality to it. That is illegal in the state of New Jersey because the attendant has access to it to change it, that he's not allowed to change it while you're playing it. If it's set, okay. But for him to change that, all right, he's got to open the machine and he's got to stop you from playing when he's doing that. But for him to reach in and be able to change that like that, is not legal because you always have to be able to win it, and he's not testing it to see whether you're winning it. So this would be hidden inside. You wouldn't know that. Now, some of the arcades have gotten more sophisticated, and they've done that remotely, remote control. So they can change the strength of the claw, and nobody ever came to your machine while you're playing it. Now, is that typical? No, it's not typical. But it does happen. They can control it from remote control. What happens when they put in expensive prizes that you really shouldn't win? Now they have to tune it way down so that that claw is just going to slip off there and not pick up that prize. Or ideally, it can pick up the prize, you see it pick up the prize, and then as it's moving along, oh, it fell out. It dropped out of the claw. Okay, well, sometimes that happens. It's a crane machine. That's what it's all about. But what if they get sophisticated and instead of having a couple relays controlling the game, you have a computer board? And what if that computer board is keeping track of how many coins are being spent on the machine, and the board is told by the operator through programming how much the prize is worth, and the computer board can keep track of percentages to know that if that's a $100 prize and the operator wants to double his money, that they want to have no more than one winner for every $200 that's spent. Well, how would the computer board control that? Possibly by easing up on the power on the claw, not allowing you to be able to get that prize because it's already paid out its percentages. Well, how about if you get a little more sophisticated? How about if the operator is setting the prices and the percentages, but the manufacturer knows that this is a show and they want to have the entertainment value to it, and they want the illusion, like a magician, that you're going to win the prize. So now the computer can give the claw enough power to pick that prize up and then loosen up the power as it's going. You can't see what power is going through that claw. It just loosens it up a little less, and then drops it. Oh, look how close you were. It dropped it along the way. Oh, try again, try again. Did it just drop it? Or did the computer make it drop so that you don't get it because it's not time for you to win? What do you mean, what time for me to win? Based upon how much money I spent? How about if the computer program is even more sophisticated and it knows how quickly you put those coins in? You're anxious for that prize, so you're pumping that coin in. As soon as it dropped it, you're ready to drop another coin in there. Well, that's somebody who's going to spend more money, isn't it? Let's not let them win so quick. How about if it knows it hasn't been played for a while, and then all of a sudden somebody comes over and they play, and the machine, the computer knows, I wasn't played for the last half an hour. So this guy coming over here now, that's somebody new. They don't have to win in the beginning. Too much information. It's not necessary. Why does the computer have that information? So that it can run a game that maybe is not always what it seems to be. These old games, the controls are simple because the concept is simple. The relays close, operates, you push the button, the thing moves, goes up, goes down. If it can pick it up, you're going to see it because the claw, you can see if it's going to slip off there or not. But you can't see what the computer's figuring and calculating and plotting and scheming because it's all in the program. You can't see what it's doing. Is that legal? Well, according to the state of New Jersey, it's legal. How could that be legal? Because as long as you're going to have some winners, the state says that's okay. Because eventually you're going to run your percentage. If Junior is trying to win the iPhone in the Crane machine, don't let him try. because the chances are he's not going to win it. He's going to waste his money. Can he win it? I'm sure he can. But can the operator be there handing out iPhones for the couple dollars you're putting in there? Common sense dictates he can't. So it's up to the player to be there for the right reason, to be there for fun. If you're not playing the game for fun, you're trying to beat the house. The house is not going to let you beat them. So your education for today is on crane machines. Now I have some cranes in the arcade, which we could show you, but they are computer-controlled cranes. They are computer-controlled cranes. Difference is, I'm running them so they play until you win. It doesn't matter what percentage. Every time it's paid to play, it's going to have a winner. So the computer is running the crane, but it's moot. It makes no difference whatsoever. It's just a matter of control, controlling the mechanisms. But if I want to run it differently, those cranes could do it. These cranes, not so easily. So you're better to play the old cranes, but remember, just because you see an old crane doesn't mean the old mechanisms are in there running it. Somebody could have replaced those mechanisms with something more modern and upgraded it, and you don't know what's going on in that machine. So common sense is your best defense. Know what you're playing for. See what you're spending. Watch your win frequencies. Watch how the call reacts. And you have a shot. That's a little bit much for a kid going into the arcade just playing for fun. Adults should know better. Play the games where you play for fun. That's what it's all about. Today's lesson, the Main Street Randyland YouTube channel. Honesty where it counts. We'll see you next time, guys. Bye.